On the hottest day of the year in London, the Queen's Guards are quick marching into 100-degree heat. And every one of them is hoping not to do this. All soldiers are prone to fainting, even the U.S. Marines.
What happened when Princess Charlotte and Prince George broke royal protocol for an injured guard will restore your faith in humanity. It was a Monday morning on the 28th of April, exactly 1 week before May 8th, the day to the much-expected VE Celebration Day. As a result of this, the entire Buckingham Palace was busy preparing for the VE Day celebrations. Everyone was working hard. In the kitchens, chefs were busy planning and cooking the meals for the big day. In the gardens, workers trimmed the hedges and made sure the flowers looked perfect. Inside the palace, the events team checked the chairs, tables, and decorations, making sure everything would be ready for the royal guests. Even the royal guards were also getting ready. As part of their tradition, the commanding officer always gave a talk before a big royal event. This talk was meant to remind the guards about the importance of their duty and to give them their assignments. And what happened when the commanding officer arrived left everyone in shock. Keep watching for more. That morning, Lieutenant Marvin Guhai, the commanding officer of the Royal Guards, stood in front of the men. His voice was clear and strong as he spoke for about 30 minutes. He reminded them that serving during such events was an honor, and that the eyes of the whole country, and even the world, would be on them. He told them to remember their training and to carry themselves with pride. After his speech, it was time to give out the day's main task, the list of guard positions for the event. This was always an important moment. Everyone wanted to know where they would be posted.
A French flavour at Buckingham Palace. Never before have troops from outside the Commonwealth been allowed to take part in changing the guard. That changed today, as the UK and France marked 120 years of ties.
He started reading the names. Sergeant Thompson, Front Gate. Corporal Edwards, Main Courtyard. Sergeant Price, West Balcony. Corporal Hughes, Ceremonial Archway. Then came the last two important positions: the East Wing, where the royal children would be sitting, and the rear position behind the senior royals, which needed the most skill and experience. For many years, Sergeant Daniel Howard had always been placed behind the senior royals. He had been there behind the late Queen Elizabeth during her last Trooping the Colour, and during the funeral of Prince Philip. People had come to expect him in that position. But that morning, Lieutenant Guhai said something that surprised everyone. East Wing, Sergeant Daniel Howard. As soon as he said that, the guards looked at each other in shock, but no one spoke. Then Guhai continued. Rear position behind the senior royals, Corporal Gordon Ramsay and Corporal Harvey Oswald. This was a big shock. Putting Sergeant Howard in the East Wing instead of behind the senior royals seemed like a step down. And replacing him with two corporals, who were lower in rank, made it even more surprising. Still, Daniel Howard showed no reaction. His face stayed calm and serious. To him, every post was important. Every job was a chance to do his duty in a new way. When all the assignments were given, the guards began their practice drills. They marched, turned, and stood still in perfect time, their boots hitting the ground together like one sound. The training went on for hours until every move was sharp and exact. By late evening, the drills were over. Lieutenant Guhai dismissed them for the day. Some guards quietly talked about the change in assignments, while others simply went about their business. But as for Sergeant Howard, adjusted his uniform, and with nothing left for the day, he took his car keys, spoke to a few colleagues, and drove home. By the time Daniel got home, it was already time for dinner. His wife, Lisa, had made roast chicken with mashed potatoes and steamed vegetables. The smell filled the kitchen, warm and comforting after the long day. He quickly settled at the table with his family. "So," he said with a smile, "how was everyone's day?" His eldest son, Michael, 12, spoke first. "School was fine. I scored the highest in maths today." "That's my boy," Daniel said proudly, giving him a nod. His daughter, Grace, 9, giggled. "I drew a picture of the Queen in art class, but I think I made her nose too big." Daniel laughed. "I'm sure it's perfect." Then Grace leaned on her elbows and looked at him seriously. "Daddy, what about you? How was your day?" "Well," Daniel said, pretending to think hard, "we had a big meeting." The boss gave everyone their roles for the VE Day celebration. And guess what? They moved me to a new position, the East Wing. "Is that good?" Michael asked. "It's different," Daniel admitted. "But every role is important. No matter where you stand, you give your best." After dinner, Daniel helped put the children to bed. He read Grace a short story and reminded Michael to finish his homework the next day. Once the house was quiet, he sat with Lisa in the living room. "So," she said, "how do you feel about this new role?" "I'm fine with it," he replied. "It's still part of service to the crown, but I want to appear to be at my best for it." Lisa raised an eyebrow. "Which means," Daniel smiled knowingly, "a good workout tonight." In the garage, his private gym was neatly set up. Weights, a bench press, resistance bands, a treadmill, and a punching bag. This was his personal ritual before every major royal event. He believed in pushing his body to its limits so he could endure long hours of standing without faltering. He began with push-ups, then pull-ups on the metal bar fixed to the wall. He moved to deadlifts, bench presses, and squats, the clang of weights echoing in the small space. He tried overhead presses, holding the bar above his head to test his balance and strength. At exactly 10 p.m., Lisa stepped into the gym. "You've done enough, love. Come to bed." She said, "Just one last set," Daniel replied, catching his breath. "I'll be there in a minute." She sighed. "Don't overdo it. You still have a week until VE Day." I know," he said with a grin. Then, in that moment, something happened that changed everything for Daniel. Stay tuned. As soon as she left, Daniel picked up the barbell for one more lift. Because his hands were filled with sweat, as he tried to pick it up, the hands slipped, and the weight dropped suddenly, crashing onto both legs. Pain shot through him like fire. He let out a heavy groan and fell back onto the bench. Lisa came running. "Daniel, are you okay?" "I'm fine," he said through clenched teeth. "You're not fine? We're going to the hospital." "No," he said, shaking his head. "It's nothing serious. Just bring me some ice." Lisa fetched a pack of ice and gently pressed it to his legs. By morning, both were swollen, and he could barely stand. Lisa took the children to school and then rushed him to the hospital. On the way, Daniel called his superior and told him about the situation on the ground. When Lieutenant Guhe asked if he needed to be dropped, Daniel simply said, "It's nothing serious, sir. I'll be back tomorrow." At the hospital, Dr. Miles Turner examined him and ordered X-rays and an MRI. "The good news," Turner said, "is there's no fracture, but you have severe contusions and soft tissue inflammation. If you try to stand for long hours now, you could risk a stress fracture, or even damage your tibialis, anterior muscle." "I have to be at work," Daniel said firmly. "The day is in a week, and preparations are still going on." Turner shook his head. "You need 2 weeks of rest. Even though it's not serious yet, without proper treatment, you could cause a microfracture that might lead to a full break, and that could mean losing full use of your leg."
This not out of Monty Python. This actually happened. Buckingham Palace guard slipped and fell as if he stepped on a banana peel as hundreds of tourists watched. This happened during the changing of the guard ceremony.
Daniel stared at the doctor, the words hitting harder than the weight had. Missing VE Day was unthinkable, but so was the thought of never standing guard again. He was at a crossroads. Either he chose service to the monarch or chose to look after his own health. So, what did he do? Let's find out. Daniel sat on the hospital bed, his hands trembling slightly. Then he shook his head slowly at Lisa and said the words that almost broke her heart. "If my legs stop working in service," he murmured, "so be it. That's what I signed up for." Lisa's eyes filled with worry. "Daniel, don't say that. You have a family. You have us." Dr. Miles Turner stepped forward. "Sergeant Howard, I have to agree with your wife. One wrong step, one long hour on those legs, and you could turn a small injury into a serious one. I'm telling you, this isn't worth risking your future." But Daniel's mind was set. After much back and forth, they reached a compromise. He would stay in the hospital for 2 days, then rejoin the Guards for VE Day preparations. "You should inform your commanding officer," Lisa said gently that afternoon. Daniel hesitated. "Calling in sick when my nation needs me," he shook his head. "It feels like failure. Failure is not being there for your children when they need their father," Lisa replied softly. Reluctantly, Daniel picked up his phone and dialed Lieutenant Guhay's number. "Sir," Daniel said, "I've had a bit of an injury. The doctor wants me in the hospital for 2 days." "That's fine, Howard," Guhay replied without hesitation. "You've never taken a break in 20 years of service. You've earned it." Hearing those words brought Daniel some relief. He spent the next 2 days in the hospital with his family. By Thursday morning, he was discharged. Dr. Turner, however, was still uneasy. "Even after the checkup, I'm warning you," she said firmly. "A few hours on your feet is fine, but days of standing guard could cause a stress fracture or damage to your ligaments. That could end your career." "I understand, Doctor," Daniel said, although his tone made it clear he intended to go ahead. Back at work, when fellow guards asked about his health, he brushed them off. "It's nothing," he said, forcing a smile. Still, the strain showed on his face during drills. After work, he went straight to his home gym. Lisa intercepted him at the door. "You should be resting, Daniel." "I can't," he said, shaking his head. "I need to be ready." Then, on Friday morning during training, Corporal Gordon Ramsay noticed Daniel slipping a packet of pain relief tablets back into his pocket. "Taking something for the pain?" Ramsay asked. "It's nothing, Corporal," Daniel replied quickly. "Just a little sore." But Ramsay wasn't convinced. Out of concern, he reported it to Lieutenant Guhay. After the day's work, Guhay called Daniel into his office. "Howard, you've given this country more than most. Forget about VE Day this time. Focus on your health." Daniel, still not buying the idea, chipped in calmly and said, "With respect, sir, standing down now would be harder for me than standing in pain." Guhay leaned back, torn between duty and concern. "You're one of the best, Daniel. I don't want to lose you to pride." Daniel left the office, but the words didn't change his mind. Back home, he headed straight for the gym. With just 2 days until VE Day, he had to feel ready. That evening, Grace watched him limping as he set down his weights. "Daddy, do you have to do this?" she asked softly. "Yes, sweetheart," he replied, forcing a smile. "It's important." Lisa joined in. "Lieutenant Guhay told you to rest. Why can't you listen?" "I've made my choice," he said simply. Over the next 2 days, Daniel trained hard, taking more painkillers than he should have. In fact, he'd finished an entire packet gone in 48 hours. Now, this is where it gets more interesting. Don't go anywhere. Then Monday arrived. He stepped into the barracks looking sharp in full uniform, his boots polished to a mirror shine, his red coat pressed to perfection. His chin was high, his eyes steady. But beneath the surface, his legs throbbed with every step. A few hours before 8:30 a.m., the time when every guard was required to gather for briefing, the parade ground filled with the sound of polished boots and crisp commands. Lieutenant Guhay stepped forward, his voice carrying over the neatly formed lines. Once again, he spoke on the importance of the day. He said it was the eyes of the nation on their every movement, the centuries-old tradition they upheld, the honor that came with serving the monarch. When he was done, his eyes settled on Daniel. "How are you feeling today, Howard?" Daniel straightened. "Fit for duty, sir. You'll be standing for only 3 hours and 30 minutes today," Guhe said plainly. Daniel's brow furrowed. "Sir, I can handle the full term. I've trained for—" Guhe cut him off. "This is not up for debate. You will stand your post for 3 hours and 30 minutes. After that, Sergeant Joseph will take over." "Sir, with respect, Guhe's tone hardened. "Howard, this is not a suggestion. It's an order." Daniel's jaw tightened, but he gave a short nod. "Yes, sir." Guhe glanced to his right. "Sergeant Joseph, you're on standby. Be ready to take over when I signal." "Yes, sir," Joseph replied firmly. After the briefing, Daniel had arrived at his post, which was the East Wing, directly behind Princess Charlotte and Prince George. He took his position with both pride and a quiet sense of dread. His uniform was immaculate, his posture sharp, his eyes fixed forward. To those watching from the outside, Sergeant Daniel Howard looked like the very image of discipline. But inside, every step, every shift of weight, sent a warning pulse through his injured legs. By 8:30 a.m., the VE Day ceremonial events were already in motion. The royal band's music drifted over the palace grounds, dignitaries mingled in hushed tones, and the crowd's excitement swelled at the sight of the senior royals. Daniel reminded himself, 3 hours and 30 minutes. That's all. Guhe had made it clear this morning he would not be doing a full shift. Yet with his condition, 3.5 hours still felt like an eternity. The first hour was manageable. The pain was there, but it came in the form of a low, insistent ache in his right leg, but his training kept him motionless. The palace guards did not shift, fidget, or show discomfort. That was the code. But by the start of the second hour, the pain became worse. Every heartbeat seemed to pulse through his knee. Sweat was rolling down the back of his neck, and his jaw was locked so tightly it felt like it might crack. It was then that Princess Charlotte turned slightly in her chair. Her young eyes looked upward at the tall figure behind her. She tilted her head. "Are you all right?" she whispered, careful to keep her voice low. Daniel didn't turn his head. His eyes stayed forward. "I'm fine, Your Royal Highness. Just a small injury." "Injury?" she asked softly. "A minor fracture," he admitted. Charlotte frowned. "That doesn't sound minor." Prince George, overhearing, leaned back slightly. "Is it your leg?" "Yes, sir, the knee, but I can manage." The two exchanged a look but said nothing more. Still, Daniel felt their eyes on him from time to time, as though they were silently keeping watch. The minutes moved on. Now the pain wasn't just in his leg, it was moving up his thigh, attacking every muscle in its path. His hands trembled slightly, his shoulders stiffened, and his breathing grew shallow. George glanced back again. "You're shaking," he murmured. "Yes, sir," Daniel replied through clenched teeth. "Still good." Charlotte hesitated, then spoke again. "You can sit in my seat if you need to, just for a moment. No one would notice." Daniel almost smiled at her kindness. "That's generous, but I can't. This is my duty." George looked around. The cameras were all focused on the king and queen. "Everyone's watching them, not us," he whispered. "You could rest for 5 minutes." "I would know," Daniel said quietly. They didn't push further, but their faces changed. They looked less like children enjoying a ceremony and more like young heirs seeing the cost of service up close. By the third hour, Daniel's body was betraying him. His vision blurred at the edges. His right leg barely supported him now, forcing his left leg to bear most of his weight. He adjusted ever so slightly, but the small change was enough for Charlotte to notice. "Sergeant?" she asked gently. No answer. George leaned closer. "Sergeant Howard, can you hear me?" Still nothing. Then the unexpected happened. At first, it looked like he was simply shifting his stance again, but the motion didn't stop. His arms dropped slightly. His chin dipped forward. His knees buckled. And then he fell. The sound of his body hitting the ground wasn't loud, but it was enough for those nearby to notice instantly. Charlotte gasped, her hands gripping the sides of her chair. George turned around, eyes wide. "He's down!" George shouted, his voice sharper than anyone had ever heard. Within seconds, one of the guards in formation broke rank and rushed to Daniel's side. A palace medic stationed just out of sight ran over. Guests in the immediate area turned to look, their voices rising immediately. Charlotte stepped back, giving space as the medic knelt beside him. George stood rooted, his eyes fixed on Daniel's pale face. The medic spoke quickly, but stayed calm. "He's breathing, but it's shallow." Two guards lifted Daniel onto a stretcher. His leg twitched, and his right hand stayed in a tight fist. Lieutenant Guhe arrived a moment later. His face was serious. He looked at Charlotte and George. "Did he say anything to you?" Charlotte nodded. "He said he had a fracture but was hiding the pain." George added, "He said he didn't care if he collapsed. He just wanted to serve." Guhe glanced at Daniel, then back at them. "That man gave everything just to stand here today." Charlotte said quietly, "He did." The stretcher was taken toward the palace medical wing. The guards returned to position. The music started again, and the ceremony went on. But Charlotte and George felt different. They stood straighter and spoke less. The joy in their faces was replaced with respect. To the crowd, it was still a day of celebration. But for the young prince and princess, the sight of Daniel collapsing in pain would stay with them for a long time. But it did not end there. After the event, the news spread fast. Different media outlets carried the story with their own headlines. Some reporters even spoke with Lieutenant Guhe. One asked, "Lieutenant, how is Sergeant Daniel Howard doing?" Guhe replied, "He's in good hands. The medics acted fast. Right now, the focus is on his recovery." Meanwhile, in the Royal Medical Center, Daniel was stabilized. His wife, Lisa, and their children were already there when he opened his eyes. Because his condition was stable, Daniel was moved to St. Luke's Hospital. There, doctors examined him and gave the news. His right tibia was fractured, and there was a severe strain in the ligaments around his knee. The injury would take time, but with proper rehabilitation and strict medical care, he would recover. As for the two junior royals, they couldn't stop thinking about what happened. They had seen a man collapse right in front of them. They wanted answers. 2 days later, as Kate picked them up from school, Charlotte asked, "Mommy, what about Sergeant Daniel Howard? Is he okay?" Kate nodded. "I heard he's still in hospital. The doctors are taking care of him." George leaned forward from the back seat. "Can we see him?" Kate hesitated. It's not part of royal protocol to visit soldiers in recovery. The children looked at each other, then back at her. "Please, Mum, we want to see him. He stood for us even though he was hurt." Kate didn't promise right away, but later that evening she spoke with William. They agreed to arrange a quiet visit for Saturday. That weekend, Daniel lay in his hospital bed, reading a book, when the door opened. He looked up, expecting a nurse. Instead, the door opened to reveal Prince George, Princess Charlotte, Kate, and William. For a second, Daniel didn't move. He blinked, then quickly tried to sit up. "Your Royal Highnesses," he began. William stepped forward, holding up a hand. "Please, Sergeant, stay where you are. We're here as friends, not as royals." Daniel settled back, still looking a little shocked. I didn't think I would see you here. Charlotte walked up to the bed, her eyes wide but warm. We wanted to make sure you're okay. You scared us. Daniel smiled faintly. I'm sorry for that. I didn't mean to. George leaned in beside her. You didn't even tell anyone you were hurt. Why? Daniel took a slow breath. Because it's my duty to stand there. I didn't want to let anyone down. Kate, who had been speaking quietly with Lisa in the corner, came closer. She touched Daniel's arm lightly. There's honor in service, Sergeant, but there's also wisdom in knowing when to rest. Your family needs you just as much as the Crown does. Lisa nodded from her chair. I've been telling him the same thing for days. George's eyes turned to the corner of the room, where two small children sat, watching the scene carefully. Are those your kids? Daniel's face softened. Yes, Grace and Matthew. Without hesitation, George and Charlotte went over. In moments, the four of them were sitting cross-legged on the floor, talking about school stories and playing a simple card game Charlotte had pulled from her pocket. Laughter began to fill the quiet hospital room. William moved to stand by Daniel's bed. The doctor tells me you've got a clean fracture in your tibia and some ligament strain. With proper rehab, you'll be walking fine in 3 months. Daniel nodded. That's what they told me too. I'll follow their plan. I have to get back to service. William gave a small smile. And you will, but you've already proved your loyalty. There's nothing to prove right now. Kate sat with Lisa again, asking about the children's schooling, how they were coping, and whether they had support while Daniel was here. Lisa admitted it had been hard, but said visits like this gave her strength. When it was time to leave, Charlotte and George shook Daniel's hand, promising to write him a letter. Kate hugged Lisa, whispering something only she could hear. William gave Daniel a firm nod, the kind that spoke more than words. As the royals walked out, Daniel felt the room grow quiet again, but this time it wasn't heavy. For the first time since collapsing, he felt truly seen. 3 months had passed since the VE celebration. Daniel had worked hard in rehabilitation and was now strong enough to return to duty. On Friday, the 18th of July, he reported to Lieutenant Guhé's office. But instead of giving him his post orders, Guhé said with a small smile, Daniel, take 1 more week. Spend it with your family. You've earned it. This time, Daniel didn't argue. He simply nodded and went home to be with Lisa and the children. The following day, Saturday morning, Daniel was at home when Lisa called him to the living room. He walked in and froze. Standing there were 5 faces he had not expected to see. Princess Charlotte, Prince George, Catherine, Princess of Wales, and Prince William.
Kate Middleton is officially a princess. On Friday, King Charles III officially named his son Prince William and daughter-in-law the Prince and Princess of Wales.
Beside them stood Lieutenant Guhé, holding a sealed envelope in his hands. Guhé handed the envelope to William and said, "It's better you hear this from His Royal Highness." William smiled. "Go ahead. Open it." Daniel broke the seal. His eyes scanned the letter, then stopped. He had been promoted to Deputy Officer of Operations for the King's Guard. Tears filled his eyes. William stepped closer. "After all you've done, this is the least we could do. Now help lead others." Daniel hugged him, speechless. Charlotte whispered, "We knew you'd be back." Daniel gave a small nod, still holding the letter close to his chest. This was more than a promotion. It was proof that his service had been seen, his sacrifice remembered, and his place among the Guard secured. So, what do you think about that unforgettable moment between the royal children and Sergeant Daniel Howard? Was it just royal kindness? Or something more? Share your opinions with us in the comments section. If you enjoyed the video, like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Also, click the following video on your screen and you will enjoy it.